Alrighty, friends. This is going to be video 2B, cellular respiration continued. I hope that last video didn't leave you completely out of breath, since it was all about fermentation with no oxygen. Haha, there you go. Started you with a joke. A bad one, but still a joke. All right, so we talked in the last video about us getting ourselves through. I'm actually going to get out of this. I don't like this. We start with glycolysis, remember? Got to chop up that glucose. If there's no oxygen, we go to this thing called fermentation. If there is oxygen, we go to aerobic respiration. We can do this for a lot longer, and we get a whole bunch of ATP out of it. Okay. This is in chapter 9, section 2, if you need to look up any part of it. Okay. And there's two parts to this one. There's the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. They still both start with glycolysis, okay? It always starts with glycolysis. It's either glycolysis and then fermentation if there's no oxygen, or it's glycolysis and then it goes to Krebs cycle if there is oxygen, okay? That's why we call it aerobic. Aerobic means oxygen, okay? All right, so let's start talking about that, okay? So we took in our glucose. Remember, the plants made the glucose. We somehow consumed the glucose. Whether we ate it directly from a plant or whether something like a cow ate the plant, stored the glucose in their cells, and then we got it from the cow. Okay, remember we're talking about heterotrophs, autotrophs. Okay, the autotrophs stored it in photosynthesis. Heterotrophs have to eat it. Okay, so we are in some way, shape, or form, we took in that glucose. Okay, then if we've got oxygen going on, we go to this step called the Krebs cycle. Okay, glycolysis broke the glucose up for us. And if you guys remember, it broke it into these things called pyruvic acid. So glycolysis turned glucose into pyruvic acid. Okay, so it produced pyruvic acid. Then Krebs cycle uses that pyruvic acid. Okay, it happens in the mitochondria. Aerobic means happens in the mitochondria. Okay, so it takes those pyruvic acids and it releases CO2. Remember, you release CO2, right? Yeah. So one of the products of cellular respiration is CO2. It comes out of this part of the process, okay? And we also make 2 ATP, okay? So in Krebs cycle, again, we're just continuing to process that material that we took in. We haven't made very much ATP though, okay? We did make 2 ATP in glycolysis, but we kind of used up some of it to kind of keep everything going. So haven't really made a lot of ATP yet, but we're just continuing to process that glucose, okay? So when we really, really, really start, look how many ATP here, oh my gosh, okay? We go through this last process called the electron transport chain, okay, or the ETC. Sometimes you might hear me call it the ETC, okay? This is the last step in aerobic respiration, and it is where we take all those different things that we've been processing and we actually put quite a few molecules of ATP out, okay? It takes in oxygen. You take in oxygen, right? Heck yeah, you do. It also takes in, if you guys remember those NADHs I was talking about, this is kind of like ATP. It's an electron carrier. It's carrying a charged up H. So anytime it's got an H, just think it's a charged up battery, okay? It's going to help us to sort of fuel this process. It's going to eventually get us 32 ATP. Finally, we got some ATP, okay? And then water. Remember, we breathe out water too. Remember, the products were water, CO2, and energy, okay? We get some energy as heat, some as ATP, and then we also release water and carbon dioxide when we breathe out, okay? So aerobic respiration gives us more energy. Aerobic respiration, we can continue for a much longer process, okay? You guys, hopefully you're going through aerobic respiration right now. I hope you're not like sprinting on a treadmill while you're trying to take these video notes or anything like that, or, lifting 400 pounds. So right now you guys are continuing aerobic respiration. And that is the thing that we can continue for a long amount of time because it puts out lots of ATP, okay? Just kind of going back to this fermentation thing, you guys, fermentation doesn't make any ATP, okay? So it can't continue for very long, okay? Aerobic respiration can continue for a long time though because it puts out ATP, okay? Lots of ATP. Think aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise are the kind of exercises that you can continue to do for long amounts of time. Walking, maybe jogging. Someone who's a marathon runner is doing an aerobic exercise. Aerobics, okay, doing any kind of like aerobic, dance exercise. That's the kind of thing you can keep up for a much longer amount of time. Whereas an anaerobic exercise would be like sprinting or lifting like a large amount of weight in a short amount of time. Okay. An aerobic exercise is one that continues to produce ATP because you can take in enough oxygen to keep fueling yourself. Okay. So you guys now know the difference between aerobic and anaerobic. Okay. So let's talk really quickly about how the two are related. Okay. So respiration versus photosynthesis. One can't exist without the other. Okay. Autotrophs, heterotrophs rely on each other. Okay. Photosynthesis stores the energy from the sun. Cellular respiration releases it. Okay. The products of one are the reactants of the other. Okay. Photosynthesis is going to release, right here. This is great. You guys, you should go ahead and write this down. This is a really good representation of it. Okay. Photosynthesis needs CO2 and water. Well, who produces that? We produce that. Okay. Or any kind of living thing that has to go through respiration. It's produced here, then it gets used here. Then whatever's produced here gets used here. Okay. It's just a continuous circle here. Okay. Energy gets in and gets stored. Energy is released during this one. Okay. Now, granted, again, light energy is something that's not produced by either one. The whole thing would stop if light energy stopped. Okay. But think of photosynthesis stores energy, cellular respiration then releases that energy for all living things. And don't forget, you guys, cellular respiration happens in all living things, even plants. Okay, plants go through both of these. We only go through one of these. Even bacteria that don't have a mitochondria, they'll go through like anaerobic fermentation. Okay. So, yep, definitely make sure you guys write this down, and I would go ahead and like grab a highlighter or put this in a different color, energy in, energy out. Okay. They are definitely dependent on one another. Okay. And you guys, that is going to be the very end of video 2B. Okay. So video 2B, we talked about, aerobic respiration and then how respiration and photosynthesis are dependent on one another. Okay. The reactants of one are the products of the other. Okay. You guys are all done with video 2B. Thanks so much.